Hello, my lovely panelists. How are you?
Right?
I'm sorry, I'm jumping from one screen to the other. Um, Thank you all for being with us. This panel is one of the three panels that explores new women's segment opportunities and focuses on Gen Z. To give you some highlights, okay, so first I want to welcome my speakers. First up, Taylor Price, founder of Fivecta, but also a TikTok financial influencer, if I may call you that. Kira McClelland, she's Senior Manager Customer Strategy Women's Markets at Australia. And Kira, thank you so very much. I know it is 2 a.m. for you, just so you know, we're as global as we can get. And Maya Eliskovic-Sigal from Argentina. She's head of Uala Bis at Uala, a unicorn fintech. Now, what better way to talk about Gen Z than to have, well, Gen Z and millennials, borderline millennials, if I may, be with us today on the discussion. It's going to be a great session. We are going to keep it casual, engaging, and we hope you'll be able to engage with us via chat, just type in your questions. So this is one of the three panels that are happening regarding women's segment opportunities, and we're talking about Gen Z. Now, I want to give you some highlights about Gen Z before we kick off with the questions with my panelists. Gen Z are born between 1995 and 2010. That seems like ages ago for me. Hopefully not for my panelists. They are now the largest segment and generation in the world globally. They control $143 billion in spending already, only at that really young age. They are, in the US alone, they represent 40% of the purchasing power, and that's not a small number. What I think I want to do is I want to just give some of the behavioral notes that we know about Gen Z today. Obviously, they're true digital natives. They were born in smartphone era almost. So they grew up with having the smartphone to their face. They search for the truth. They believe in dialogue to end conflict. They're not very violence prone compared to their older generations. They are not as comfortable with debt as their older generations, maybe because they have seen their parents or their previous predecessors have all of these financial crises, and that has affected how they see money and debt and finances today. Today, we can say that 47% of 16 to 17-year-olds are already smartphone owners and use mobile banking, which is not a real small number. They are hungry for financial literacy. They want to understand the world. They are pragmatic. They are practical. They are analytical, and they want solutions. And I think I want to tackle with our truest Gen Z on the panel, Taylor Price. Hi, Taylor. Thank you for being with us today. Please remember to unmute yourself to talk. I want to ask you, from a Gen Z years perspective, what are the true behaviors and maybe to financial services in particular of a Gen Z today?
I really think when it comes to Gen Z and talking about financial services, one of the things, at least within the United States, that really bears us down is that financial literacy and education isn't even really talked about. Only 6 out of 50 states in the United States require a personal finance course for testing. And so when we're discussing like how to open up a credit card or how to get started into investing or how to pay down student loans, we need to have open, honest communication.
Yes, very true. And if I want to take it one step further and I want to go beyond just behavior, I want to ask something very specific about gender, because this is part of what we do. Do you think there is a difference in gender, in the sense that when it comes to financial services behavior, that girls or boys and women, men is not really relevant as a term for you maybe, but girls and boys act differently when it comes to financial services?
Oh, for sure, most definitely. I think that especially nowadays, we're seeing so many doors open for platforms that are specifically targeting women when at such the longest time, we weren't even being catered to, especially within the investing world. And so when we're looking at, these groups on Reddit that are considered boys clubs, it can be a little bit, alarming for women, or women don't really want to touch that. But having panels like this and myself being included, being able to talk about these different conversations makes women want to get into financial education and financial literacy. And especially, being on social media, as you said, a TikTok personal finance creator, so many young women have changed the majors wanting to go into finance as a result of just having this conversation, period.
Wow, that's just great. It's great. I mean, however way we can inspire, I think that is amazing. Kira, I want to turn to you, and I want to talk about your current revamping of the Ruby brand. Was this part of a wider strategy to reach these newer generations, cater for Gen Z as independent segment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of the broader strategy, absolutely. I think what's really important is, we're constantly monitoring the financial needs and behaviours of women across all generations to make sure that we are still relevant. We're helping to provide education and information in a way that makes sense. So you raised a really great point around the types of content Gen Zers like to consume, Taylor. What we know is that Gen Zers aren't as binary perhaps, but I think there's still a lot of work to be done around understanding some of the pitfalls that women have fallen into before when it comes to financial behaviors, financial needs, and opportunities, and how can we leverage Ruby as an opportunity to help deliver some of that financial education. Also, I guess it's from starting out in your career, you're starting your first job, through to we're also talking to the mums or grandmothers of Gen Zers that we know are trusted advisors. But it's part of a broader strategy, as I said, and that sort of includes whether it's a savings product that's targeted to 18 to 30-year-olds that we know are going to help them in the longer run with a higher savings rate. But yeah, as I said, it's really underpinned by monitoring our data and understanding what's going on, and then making sure that we're using all of our channels like Ruby to make sure that we're still relevant.
Yeah, very true, very correct. Thank you for that, Kira. Maya, I want to hear from you now. So Wawa, I don't know whether intentionally or it just happened, has an amazing penetration with Gen Z. You have 22% of 18 to 25-year-old Argentinians owning an Wawa card. What do you think were the keys to your success with the Generation Z?
Thank you, Carol, for the question. And you're completely right. We have a big penetration in that specific community. Wawa started as the first fully digital onboarding for a financial services application in Argentina. We launched 4 years ago. Yesterday was our birthday, and we have achieved a great number of users, not only in the Gen Z, but especially in the Gen Z sector. I think a couple of reasons why that happened that we can look at are: first, or simplicity, transparency, the easiness that we've worked so hard to achieve to make sure that our product can be used by anyone, that is that it's easy to understand, it's easy to get in, and that can be operated on a daily basis by the methods that the Gen Z prefers. So we do chat for all of our questions with our users. We operate fully digitally. We don't have an appointment that you have to go to a branch that you need to look at your papers and sign. Everything's done through the app. So that's definitely part of why they started trusting us and they started using us. And I think that what we've worked really hard to achieve is also the brand that Gen Z really identifies with, not only in how we approach communications, how we are close to the users, or if you look at our marketing versus our competitors and more legacy banks, they have a completely different way of talking to this group. So I think that the marketing, the approach to the user, the being there, the simple product has really helped us. And what we do now is we cater, now that we've seen that they're with us, we try to cater to them with
we have a lot of gaming discounts, for example, and we know that that's super important, and Gen Z likes that. We see that. We partner with Netflix and Spotify to make sure that we're getting to those services that they will need. So I think that we got there early, and now we keep them engaged through tailoring our proposal to them.
Thank you. And from that, I want to move to Taylor exactly on spot. You talked about Maya, the UX UI aspect of things, and the seamlessness and the fact that it's 100% digitally native. Moving to Taylor, I want to see, is this something that resonates well with you? Is this how a bank should reach Gen Z as well, similar to how a fintech has done it? In that sense of agility and ease of doing things. And I want to tackle the second part of the question, which I think Maya also touched upon, which is the marketing aspect of things. In terms of messaging and imagery, what resonates with you? What do you want to see? And where do you want to see them? Which channels can they use to communicate with you as a Gen Z? Sorry, 3 questions there, all in one.
Oh, good. Pertaining to the first question, I think that having a digitally native platform is something that's extremely convenient for me, and I think a lot of other people within our generation. We're side hustles, full-time jobs, going to college full-time, all these different kinds of things. And so when a platform can be automated and it can be efficient, that is something that we are instantly gravitating towards. And in terms of trust, if we're able to communicate to these audiences or to these companies via a Twitter support team or a social media compliance team, something along those lines, or even a chat bot within the app, I think that's something that helps out very, very great within Gen Z. Along with the second question, which I think was about branding, right, and how we're kind of catering to
imagery
Gen Z.
and messaging, yeah.
Right. I think having this very open, honest, but yet personalized dialogue is something that is extremely important. Within our generation, I think we're continuing to see more and more personalization as time goes on. We want to see our names within the apps. Hey, Taylor, how are you doing? We want to get maybe a text message or a push notification, happy birthday. We want to know when we're spending too much or when we're saving too little. All these different kinds of things really, really matter and almost gamifies the experience a little bit, like, ooh, when are they going to come at me next? And then the third question, I can't remember that one.
It was whether on which channels do you want the banks or financial institutions to actually communicate with you?
One, within the app, I think it's extremely important to just have that ease of use. If we're trying to get in contact with somebody, we can immediately go into the app with like a little chat bubble or something like that. Secondly, I think a lot of people in our generation actually use Twitter as, hey, I need help with this. And so we're actually seeing a lot of different companies have a company name -support. And this way, if somebody else has that same exact question, it can be easily answered within this dialogue.
Okay, that's great. I want to build on that and jump to Kira, because you're the bank in the chat. So then, how do you think you as a financial service provider can adapt your product and services delivery to cater to Gen Z? Does it require radical shifts or maybe simple tweakings and adaptations to what you already have?
Yeah, I think it's great to hear from you, Taylor, and it reaffirms a lot of the pieces of work that we've been working on at Westpac. Certainly, I think it's perhaps tweaks. I think it's really, as I said, just underpinning all of our initiatives by data and insights and really understanding these behaviours and the ways in which we are communicating two ways from customers, and in particular our Gen Zers, and understanding how they would like to be in touch with us, how they want to provide feedback, how they want to use our services. I don't necessarily think that it's products, huge shifts in products. I think they might remain very similar, but it might just be understanding what are some of those societal issues that underpin what are the needs that are behind the products that our Gen Zers need from us. As I mentioned earlier, we created a special savings rates for younger cohorts, but also, some of our data at the moment shows us that women men are outpacing women when it comes to home ownership, and it starts at this higher end of Gen Zers, almost twice the rate. So it's understanding, okay, well, what are some of the issues that are sitting behind women entering into some of those more complex financial products or needs, and then understanding how we can model our service offerings to make sense for them, to access financial literacy, education, and services to help them out in their future selves.
Thank you. Maya, I want to come to you, and you did talk about the UX UI and the seamlessness of the whole thing, but I want to focus on some of the aspects that Taylor did focus on regarding shift in channels of communication. How does Wawa communicate with its clients and prospects?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we do is, I'll start with prospects because that's easier. For many, many years, we only did digital communications. And I remember people coming up to me and saying, I think I've seen Wawa on YouTube, but I've never seen it on the streets. Is it real? And that was obviously a comment from my older relatives and not from my younger relatives, because my younger relatives would say, I see it all the time on YouTube. I know what it is. So I think that your question is very interesting because it touches on a theme that's very important both for Gen Z and women, which is trust. I think that post the 2008 financial crisis, and that in the US and many other crises that we've had in other parts of the world, just building that trust and having people recognize who you are and trust you with their money is the most important thing that fintechs and banks alike should be focusing on. So we did realize that for the Gen Z generation, we needed to communicate on a digital manner, and that's the way we communicate. And now going back to your first question, the way we communicate in the platform is with a bubble that you can press and we can chat. Taylor, we'll work on the birthday idea. That's a great one. But we do have the chat bubble. And that's the way we communicate with everybody. And that also helps us build trust because we tell everybody, especially in the pandemic, do not trust anyone who's texting you to ask you things about Wawa because we communicate through the app. So this is the channel that is safe and that you can trust us with. So I think what we're starting to do more is reach out to more users outside of the digital means, because we know that that's still very important, especially as you tailor towards another demographic. But for the Gen Z and for women especially, we think digital is a great way to get clients and to also serve them.
Okay, thank you, Maya. Before I continue with my questions, I just want to say to our audience here, feel free to enter your questions either in the stream chat or on Slido so that we can ask our panelists. But I have a bunch of questions anyway. If you don't, I have enough. So I want to jump to Taylor and Kira on this, because this was not going to be my next question, but I'm going to flip things around because trust is really a critical factor. And I want to see between a millennial and a Gen Z what the difference is on trust. How do you see trust? What does trust mean to you, Taylor? And then what does trust mean to you, Kira, especially when it comes to financial service providers and financial services in general? Go ahead, Taylor.
I think that, yes, I think that especially within Gen Z, trust really kind of relies on relatability. And so when we're thinking about joining other services, we're asking other friends, hey, what do you think of this platform? And so the relatability, for example, when I'm doing my videos talking about maybe financial entanglement or student loans or something that may be extremely stressful to a lot of young individuals, I'm changing my presentation. I'm not wearing any makeup. I'm in a hoodie. I'm in sweatpants. I'm coming at this relatability factor, which automatically, I think for our generation, really assumes this trust. Oh, she's like me. She's in my similar position. She's gotten out of it. So can I.
And Kira?
Yeah, look, I think in terms of the data that we've seen, trust in particular, trust and security is something that rates incredibly high, in particular for women across all generations, all segments. And so I think it's really absolutely closely monitoring what our customers expect of us. But to your point, to your question, Kirill, I think it's around, from a millennial perspective, I think that perhaps our access to financial education has been slightly different. There is so much more content out there that is consumable to whatever your preference is, which is amazing. But for perhaps in as I speak for myself as a millennial, I think that a lot of the reliance was to perhaps family or friends and trusted advisors or financial experts, perhaps. Whereas now for Generation Z, it feels like there's just, you can go out and you can hunt for your own information and you can kind of solve a lot of these. I guess it's like the YouTube of or Google, and you can get out there and you can source that information for yourself. So yeah, it's a different world, a different world.
It really is. Kira, I want to stay with you. I want to ask you a question on that. Because I'm thinking of my parents and my parents' generation here. Would you trust a bank that has absolutely no branches? Would you bank with a 100% invisible institution? Would you trust your money?
I think that's a really good question. I think that there is absolutely opportunities for all types of banking, and different people have different preferences for that kind of for a footprint, whether it be digital or physical. There are absolutely benefits to being completely virtual, and perhaps in some particularly transactional products, I think that is a great option. I think that some people will have a preference that they'd like to physically sit down with a bank manager if they are looking to take out $1 million loans to get themselves into their homes. So I think it's really down to the individual and the support network that they have around them to make those more complex financial decisions. But I think there's opportunities for all types of banking, absolutely.
Thank you. Maya, I feel you have something to say, but before you do,
Yes.
I want to add an aspect to it, because we're seeing a lot of fintechs or at least challenger or neo banks revert to the phygital aspect of doing things. So having some sort of physical component that comes with the 100% digital banking service to create that trust. So please integrate that concept and what you think of that when you're about to make your comment.
Thank you. You read my need to unmute. So I find it funny that you used the word invisible, and I think Taylor might agree with me that just not being brick and mortar doesn't make you any less visible. I think that the world has moved in a direction where physical things can also go wrong, when physical doesn't mean more trustworthy. And I'm Argentinian. If I go to the bank here, it's the least visible thing. You have to go through 3 security guards. You need to tell them exactly what you're doing. It's not made as I wouldn't call that visible. Yes, it's there and I can see it from across the street, but I wouldn't say that that's visible. And on the other hand, every Wawa customer, and now we have 3.5 million of them, gets the Wawa card with an email address to our CEO. And you can reach our CEO on Twitter, and you'll see it if you follow him. He tweets in Spanish, so I don't advise it if you don't speak it. But he's responding to users all the time. So my question would be, what is more visible than that approachability? Or I don't even know who is looking at my accounts or who the CEO of my branch bank is. So visibility and invisibility and trustability is built in so many different channels now that just because someone has a brick and mortar presence, that doesn't mean that they're going to be more transparent with you, that have a simpler product, or easier to reach.
Thank you for that. Taylor, do you want to add anything on that from a Gen Z's perspective?
Sure. Just from, again, the automated efficiency standpoint, I don't believe I have any friends that don't use direct deposit. Like paper checks, when are we going into the banks and depositing our paper checks? If there's direct deposit we want it on. If we can make a peer-to-peer transaction, we want to do that through our smartphones. We rarely even hold the cash most of the times. And so when it comes to banking online, I think it's something that we can trust, depending on the security measurements, as Kira was saying. And that's really something that, especially when it comes to like the UI UX portion, has to be very, very visible. And so there's the invisibility aspect of, okay, they may not have any branches, but if you can be visible online through, these are our security measures, this is how you can get in contact with our CEO, like Maya said, I think that's something that helps out a lot.
Thank you. And I want to now bring up a different aspect of things. I want to talk about gender and binary gender. Does binary gender segmentation, pure male, female, make sense to Gen Z? And what kind of subsegments by gender identity are we seeing? Maybe Taylor, we start with you, and then we move around.
Of course. So in regard to the situation, I think there's so many different avenues we can go down. So for example, we can bring up this male-female aspect of the pink tax, where a lot of different companies are approaching other women regarding like this pink label, where we actually have to pay more. And so we could say on one hand, we don't want that. But on the other hand, sometimes women may want something that's targeting them, especially when it comes to something that has been, like I keep on bringing this up about the investing platforms that we haven't been targeted. A lot of them have been male-oriented audiences where we feel underserved. We don't feel like we're being communicated or talked to. And so I think it's a very hard situation to kind of like tackle. But in terms of companies itself, I really think it relies on the founder's mission. If the founder is a female and they have this intrinsic motivation to help and cater to other underserved women or female audiences, then resonate that within your branding. And through that, that will show and measure like, this is your passion, this is your purpose.
But just to maybe get a capture of maybe a simple yes, no aspect, do you see the world as a binary gender? As a Gen Z?
I think we're headed more into non-binary as Gen Z as a whole.
Okay. And Maya, how about you? Do you think a binary gender segmentation makes sense?
I agree with Taylor. I think that the contemporary situation is a lot more fluid than what we were used to traditionally. I mentioned this the other day, but we used to have a bank that had a women's card. And that's something that we would never do. It's just we don't think it would resonate. But I would say our gender focus is a lot more on the side of diversity and creating diverse teams. So we're a financial institution and we're in tech. Anyone who knows anything about those two industries knows that it's not a very diverse place traditionally. Yet at Wawa, we've been working extremely hard to get the numbers to be a 50-50 place. That's 100% where we want to be. And a couple of things that we're working on, for example, is we have a Jedi Academy where we bring women to train in technology so that they can join the teams, because we want to build a diverse product. We want to build diverse teams that can build better product. So that's definitely the focus. I wouldn't say that we look at it to offer different services to our users.
Thank you. And Kira, from maybe an incumbent's perspective, especially one that was maybe very instrumental in creating and really being a pioneer in launching specific programs that are custom and to women, but yet not 100% labeled per se, but you do have the Ruby brand as well. So what's your take on this? I mean, I understand that up until maybe millennials, gender and binary gender made a lot of sense at many different levels. And we really did see the need to create that inclusion of women who were 100%, if not 100%, a very large percentage-wise, excluded from the financial services world. Moving into the new generation where binary gender doesn't make sense anymore, how do you think you're going to be able to marry those two different worlds in your services?
Look, I think there's a couple of layers to this. One is the understanding the executional elements, the communications elements, and absolutely, I can see in terms of the data that there is a less binary focus for Gen Zers. And I think that should be representative in our external communications as we're taking campaigns to market, that we should be absolutely inclusive of all people. I'm also really mindful of that underserving component that you mentioned previously around, and Ruby exists and it will exist until it needs to, where it comes to building financial confidence in women. It's a platform where we can have these conversations around financial education and inspiring content around, helping you start your business and whatever, or investing, as you mentioned earlier as well. We know that the data that we have seen for many, many years shows that there are some societal issues where women have been traditionally underserved. So I think it's when we come back to sort of more of our internal data segmentation, it's just understanding, well, what are some of the trends and behaviors that we have seen historically? How are we using our communications channels like Ruby, like a number of other partnerships that we have to help shift the dial on some of those societal issues? That's not necessarily what we're going to take to market in our communications execution. But I think it's tracking those behaviors and what's going on for men and women. However, I think it's also sub-segmentation in addition to that. So whilst we do track across, gender, age, all of those, geography, all of those sorts of normal segments, I think we also look at the life moments. So what are the life events that somebody's having? Because that doesn't necessarily need to be gender binary. It's somebody may go through the process of starting their first job, or they're having a baby in their family, or growing their family, but that's a significant life event that will have a financial component to it. So how can we understand what your financial needs are in those moments? And then we're serving up content or services or, communication that's relevant to you in that life moment. So it's definitely multi-layered, but we absolutely have an opportunity to shift the dial when it comes to building financial confidence in women who we know have been underserved. And we're certainly committed to doing that for sure.
Thank you. Amazing. And I think, that life moments approach, I think is very smart in the way that it's across all genders, and it applies no matter who you are and where you are. I think that's very smart in terms of segmentation. I want to take one of the questions that we have in the stream chat, and then I can go back to some of the questions I still have. Maria Echave from Mexico, I believe, is asking, what can you tell us about insurance and investment products for Gen Z? It is thought that this generation don't think much about the future. Is that true, Taylor?
So it depends. For investment, I think that it's something that's definitely gone to scale, at least as of recently, through, for example, trends, especially on TikTok. I created a video where I presented myself as an older woman and myself as a grandma talking to her younger grandchild about investing and about why it's important to utilize these tax advantaged retirement accounts or investing accounts. And so I think that there's definitely opportunities, and I think that this is a growing market for Gen Z, considering that it is 40% of the consumer market, to start making those marketing messages or communications available to them. As far as insurance is such a huge world. We can talk about car insurance, life insurance, medical. And so when we're thinking about it, at least from my personal understanding, car insurance, I believe a lot of people within my generation have cars. As far as health insurance, there's up until, at least in the United States, I believe it's age 26 that you can be under your parents. And so I think Kira brings a good point about using data to create these different kinds of answers or analysis on how to approach those situations. And I don't have that much surrounding data to really answer that question about insurance.
Thank you. Maya, your take on that question.
Yes, I think that what we see is what I usually answer when they ask me about financial services changing is the financial services that we offer are not that different from the financial services we've been offering, the financial services sector has been offering for the past 100 years, but I do think that they're tailored towards what we need right now. So an example on insurance and on investments. On insurance, we started doing micro insurances that we can offer through a partner to our users. So you can pay basically no money for insurance for your phone. That's something that anyone can relate to, and it's a small expense for a bigger return, and that I think has resonated really well with Gen Z. And on the investment side, we have a money market fund that we offer all our users. And one of the reasons why we built it that way was we knew that our users, and specifically younger users, wanted the money to be taken out of the fund immediately. So we went around with a lot of different partners and a lot of different things to make sure that you could withdraw money from your investment account 24/7. Even if it's Sunday at 3 a.m, because that's when you need to pay for a beer. So people can drink starting at 18 in Argentina. That's why Gen Z applies. But so what we did is we worked with the financial products that we usually would offer, but we tweaked them a little bit to make sure that we're catering towards a younger crowd.
Thank you for that. I want to build on all the conversation and ask maybe a tricky question. To what extent do you think that many of these adaptations that we are seeing now in terms of becoming seamless, the pandemic having accelerated and expedited the whole process of becoming more digital, and then maybe fine-tuning all our services to start catering for Gen Z, and we know what these would mean based on the conversation we had. Do you think that these changes will help create better financial inclusion for women? Because a lot of these challenges that we talked about for Gen Z, the need for convenience and being able to have access to all these things easily, is actually very critical for women because they're time poor, they have to do so many things at the same time. So do you think that now turning our focus to Gen Z in a way will help solve financial inclusion for women? Kira, I'll start with you on this one.
I mean, I think, as we've mentioned earlier, that I think having access to education, and we know some of the biggest barriers to economic empowerment is access to education and services. So I think it's wonderful to see so much access. And also the tools and services in terms of tracking and encouraging and prompting positive financial behaviours, I think is also something that we'll see will help all people, but women in particular. But I think there's also some ways that we can use technology to address societal issues again, where we know that women are predominantly impacted. Earlier this year, we launched a program in our technology that identified transaction description abuse. So essentially what we were seeing was very low value transactions being sent to all people, but predominantly women again, where using the transaction description, they were sending messages of abuse to a victim. And so we were able to pop in a block and report that person to the authorities. So I think that's an example of us sort of using technology, using access, looking at the ways in which women are predominantly impacted, and staying on the front foot to use technology and the like to help support women to set them up for success.
Thank you for that. I think we have less than 30 seconds left. I want to thank my wonderful panelists. Thank you for this amazing discussion. I want to take one word from each of you when we flip the roles. So Maya and Kira, if you were a client of a bank, what one service or a change would you like to see from a bank? And Taylor, I want you to flip your role and be the banker. What do you think you need to change in how you serve? So the floor is yours, ladies. Let's start with Taylor, then Maya, then Kira. And I will have to shut off and go to the other one, but please do finish this and we'll wrap after that.
Of course. Yes. I think just having the discussion about financial education and financial literacy, I think a lot of individuals assume that we actually know it all when we don't, when it's not talked about in middle school or high school or even college. I was a finance major, and a lot of these topics, these very simple topics about budgeting, were not even communicated or discussed. And I had to use Google and the power of online to understand what this actually means. And so I would just cater more so, how do I get started within this certain aspect, whether it be budgeting, what is the difference between good credit or bad debt, all these different kinds of things. Very, very simple, plain Jane.
What I would think is flexibility. I think that we don't realize how much, for example, little things like changing the day your card is due would make a lot of difference. Or I run our merchant acquiring division. We currently have a set of fees for immediate dispersal, and just giving more options to users to choose when they want to receive their money, when they're getting paid from a sale, and being able to pay differently according to when they want to receive it would be something that could be super interesting for banks to offer.
Yeah, I think just to build on that, Maya, I think that personalization. I think that having the opportunity to create a banking solution that meets your needs. For example, yesterday I updated my payment schedule for my mortgage to align to my payday, and just making sure that those little tweaks so that you can personalize in your service to make sure that there's money in the account the next day, and all of that sort of thing is really important to ensure that you've got control, because I think ultimately empowerment comes from knowing what you've got, what are you working with, and how can you optimize it. And in particular, we want that for women. So yeah, I think I'd love to see that personalization continue. And as we know, it's particularly important to this generation. So I'm really excited to see what happens there. And also the prompting. I think there's a lot of opportunity in prompting some of those really positive financial behaviors to really encourage overall positive financial habits.